Welcome back to the Two Oceans Ultra Marathon podcast. We are 8 weeks out. We're really getting into the thick of things here. For those of you who are running the Baldwin Sport Peninsula Marathon actually this weekend, good luck. If that is your qualifier, even more good luck, if that makes sense. Really hoping it goes well and you're ticking that box and getting it done. Just remember, making sure that recovery is going to be critical after that. And that really is the gist of what we're speaking about in today's episode, is focusing on that recovery. As usual, Sean is with me to talk us through this. Sean, welcome.
Thanks, Dave. Excited about this. This is one of the things that I think would really benefit every single runner, no matter what sort of level you are. So excited to get stuck into it.
And the timing of these always seem to come at the right time. I feel like I need recovery as we speak. So yeah, I think, Sean, if you can maybe just get us into kind of why is recovery important? Why is it such a big thing?
Yeah, we always like to start with this as the starting question, because runners hear us say recovery and they think we just mean you must run less, right? And they really do believe that more is better, and that if you're running more and more and more and more, you're going to be better and better and better. Okay, but I think the key thing here is that if you understand why physiologically why recovery is important, you will start to value it a lot more. Okay, so let's just understand that when we are running, when you're in the gym, when you're doing that yoga session and running up those hills, we think that that is when we're getting stronger and fitter and better. It's actually not. When you're doing those things, the body is actually breaking down. So your muscle fibers, we land up with little micro tears within those fibers. There's quite a bit of systemic failure that's going on at that point in time. The body doesn't like that. Okay. And then when we recover, so once the body is broken down, when we recover, the body then goes, whoa, I did not enjoy what you put me through last week. I'm going to make myself a little bit bigger, stronger, faster, fitter to sustain that the next time. And it builds itself up to do that again. We train, we break down, we recover, we get stronger. And that is why and how we build our training plans. And we spoke about that a little bit last week, and we'll dive into why that recovery aspect is so important. But when you start to realize that you only get the benefit of the training that you're doing when you recover, you then really start to value this aspect a hell of a lot more.
Sean, good and well. Recovery, we're now starting to realize a little bit that it is important, but what should we be focusing on in these recovery weeks? So what actually constitutes as a recovery week?
So we build our cycles of training load and how we build it up. And normally on a 4-week cycle. There are different adaptations to that. But for the Oceans Ultra plans, they're built on a 4-week cycle, right? So we're building for 3 weeks, and then we have a recovery week, which is where you probably are now in your plan. And in that recovery week, the focus there is really to reduce the volume. Okay, so the amount of running that you're doing. Sometimes that is through reducing the number of days. So if you were running 5 days, you might be running 4. But for the most part, we often keep those number of days the same if you're running four times a week. So we're cutting down the amount of time that you're running, not necessarily the frequency. Okay, so that's the key thing. Very often in these recovery weeks, we may keep the intensity the same, because the science and the literature has shown that if we reduce the volume but perhaps keep up the intensity, that we're still ticking over by recruiting a lot more muscle fibers, that helps with some recovery aspects. So again, reduce volume, keep intensity the same, and keep the frequency, the number of days that you are running, the same. And really important in this phase, and runners might be happy to hear this or not, but we like to reduce strength training as well in this week. Okay, so if you were doing 2 strength sessions a week, you'd make me really happy. In this week, you're now only going to do 1 strength session a week. If you were only doing 1, I would suggest that you still do that 1 session, but reduce your sets and your reps. Okay, so we also want to keep the consistency and the continuity and the routine of that, so that you don't drop out of that when you get into your next block. We really just want to make sure that we are bringing the overall load down slightly, so that now when we go into the next 4-week block, we're ready to go in and smash that. In these weeks as well, we often like to include a time trial. Okay, and the reason for that is that is how we measure your performance. That is how we measure the effectiveness or the last 4 weeks of your plan or the last 8 weeks of your plan, however long. But we want to use that as the performance indicator. And the reason we put that in the recovery weeks is because then you're normally a little bit fresher. And the reason we use these time trials is because I really, really, really don't want you to be trying to test yourself in your long runs. Don't try and get faster and faster and faster in your long runs. We want to run those nice and easy. And then you know that you're going to be doing a time trial in a couple of weeks. And then we measure one time trial to the next time trial to see if there have been if there has been any improvements, or if we need to tweak things slightly, if we need to change your training paces. We use those time trials for that. All right. And depending on your experience, depending on how long you've been running, how fast you are, those are generally a 5K time trial, but we sometimes do use an 8K time trial for those as well. But for the most part, I like a 5K one, and I like that they are done on the same course. So if you're running with your running club, that's cool. You can go and do that every 4 weeks with your running club so that you have the same route, so that those two time trials are comparable.
Sure. I mean, we're talking load here and the kind of nitty gritties that in the training plan itself, but is that sort of the best form of recovery, or what are we talking when we're talking forms of recovery and how to recover properly?
Yeah, so there's just there's so much noise around this, right? Everyone's trying to sell you something, okay? And so this is the key point here, is that the 3 best forms of recovery are sleep, nutrition, and your load management, okay? And I believe those things are in a pyramid. So think of those things, the sleep, nutrition, and your load management, as the base of your pyramid, and everything else at the top of that. And we want to have a strong base. So we really want to make sure that, and let's start with nutrition, right? So we really, really want to make sure that we are eating enough within the day, and that we're fueling our runs, especially our runs that are longer than 60 minutes, so that we're not constantly finding ourselves in a depleted state. And what's really important here is that your post-running nutrition is key. We have what we call like a little window of opportunity, I guess, which is 20 to 40 minutes after that run. You really want to make sure that we are replenishing. So putting back the energy sources that you used for running, and that energy source is glycogen. So essentially what we want to make sure that we replenish there is a carbohydrate. And so that then refills those stores back up. Of course, there has been some muscle damage. And so, we do want to make sure that we're getting that muscle resynthesis and rebuilding of the regeneration of the muscles as well. So we will have an element of protein in this nutritional snack that you're having after your run. The ratio of those is 4-1, so 4 carbohydrates to 1 protein. And what I really love about that is, and we've joked about this a lot, Dev, but my favorite day in the science was when I read that a chocolate milk is a really good source of this 4-1 as a replenishment for your long run. So a Steri Stumpy, a chocolate milk, something like that is really, really great. It's awesome. It's easy to grab on the way home from your run, or as you're sitting chatting to your running mates. And then when you go home, have a shower, make sure you have your good breakfast or meal thereafter. So don't only just rely on that Steri Stumpy, okay? So that won't suffice. We want to really make sure that we are replenishing what we put out, okay? We want to just make sure that we're putting that back. I mentioned load management, so I've just touched on that in terms of how we do our recovery weeks and so on. That also has to do with, the number of rest days that you're putting in your week as well. So how we're managing that on a weekly basis as well. Then obviously on that macro cycle, which is in the 4-week sort of elements. And so, more isn't better here, guys. That we always do, as I said in the beginning, like we just think that if we push more and put in more miles and more miles, that's not going to help. We have to make sure that we balancing that the volume and recovery. And we spoke quite a bit about that last week, but also that we are ensuring that we're getting rest days within our week as well. So I think that sort of puts it on top there.
Sean, you mentioned 2 of those pillars, if you'd like, that make up your base of that pyramid. So your nutrition and the load management. Now, what would be the third one? And I know this one's quite a big one.
Yeah, thanks. Sleep, leave out the really important one. So load management, nutrition, sleep. That forms the basis of your pyramid. Okay. I know, Dave, you refer to it as the superpower of sleep, which I love that. I think that's really, really cool. And really, biology is amazing and nature is amazing. And when we sleep, that is when we are regenerating, right? So mind, physical, hormonal, that is why we are, that's why we sleep. Otherwise we would just carry on going. And most mammals require some elements of sleep so that they can regenerate. This is where there is a natural release of the particular hormones that help your body regenerate. So in particular, growth hormone, testosterone get released at a particular point in your sleep cycle, in your circadian rhythm. And that helps the muscles resynthesize. It helps you get stronger. And that's what really helps with all of this recovery. That tends to happen, that release of those hormones tends to happen if you are getting to bed and to sleep before 10 p.m. Okay. And I know that doesn't always seem like a feasible act, but we want to try and then get to bed a little bit earlier if we can, because that sleep cycle or that release of hormones relies on that cycle and the amount of time we give our bodies to rest. And so that's quite a key thing, trying to get to bed a little bit earlier, especially in these peak phases of training. Let's try and prioritize sleep more so than other elements if we can. And it's really, really about, one, the amount of sleep you're getting, yes, the quantity of sleep that you're getting, but it's also about the quality of the sleep that you're getting. Okay. So I'm a realist. I understand that we all have lives, we have kids. I don't have kids, but we have husbands and wives and families and careers, and there's friends, and there's a lot going on. And so often when I say to people, you must really try to get 8 hours of sleep a night, people are like, sure, no, I just can't. And then it just goes in one ear and out the other. Okay. So that's why I say maybe make your goal to go to bed a little bit earlier. And then we want to focus on the quality of sleep there. And how we do that is because a lot of that's out of your control, right? You don't control how you sleep, but there actually are a few things that you can do to make that a little bit better. We call that sleep hygiene. So it's controlling things within your world and your environment before you go to bed. Okay, so what are those things? One, the environment. You want to try and make sure that you have a dark room. So if you have blackout curtains, that'll be spot on. That'll be amazing. If you don't, I'd recommend that you get a set of eye patches to keep the light out. Okay. That's really, really key. In your room, if you do happen to have a television in your room, or you've got your cell phone or something nearby where there's a little light, I would suggest that you try and cover that. Your eyelid is a really thin membrane, and even though you're sleeping, if there is a light, that's going to be picked up by the optic nerve, and your brain is still going to be reacting. So you want to try and control that. We also want that room to be cool. I know it's summer months here in South Africa, and anyways in Pretoria, it's not been cool, but you want to try and create a cool environment, perhaps with some fresh air coming in. Ideal temperatures for sleep are between 18 to 20 degrees Celsius. So if you can control that environment, I would try to steer clear, perhaps cool your room initially with an aircon, but I'm not a fan of sleeping with an aircon. Often I find athletes get sick if they do that, but you want to have a nice cool room. And then lastly, this is a biggie with sleep hygiene, and we're all victims, or not victims. What's the word? Not victims of it. We're all to blame. We're all guilty of this. We're definitely not victims of it. Is playing on your devices, so your cell phones, your laptops, before you go to bed. I do it. It's a bad habit. I literally get into bed, pick up my phone, doom scroll through Twitter or X or whatever it's called these days, and land up falling asleep with my phone in my hand. And really, guys. One, Dev made a joke the other day that, you're not going to have good dreams with the amount of bad news that is around the world at the moment. But aside from that, from a scientific perspective, the light coming out of our devices affects our hormones with the hormone melatonin, which would then affect your quality of sleep. And so really, really important to try not to do that. I've made it my goal for this year to try and read before I go to sleep. And even if I read one page of a book, and then I have to read that page again tomorrow because I've fallen asleep, it's far better than falling asleep with your device. And just to reiterate around the quantity of sleep, guys, there's a number of studies that show that if you are getting less than 7 hours of sleep repetitively, consecutive days over and over and over again, you have a much higher risk of illness and injury. So let's just try and prioritize this, especially in high peaks of your training, and and definitely closer to race day.
Sure. And I suppose, I mean, those things all tie in, and I know you talk about sort of that pyramid and that. But we've all been on social media. We know you mentioned earlier the gadgets that are out there and the really cool devices and tools and everything, and these space massage looking boots. What is your take on compression garments and things like massage guns and those tools?
If you're over 50 and want to recover from sessions faster, run pain and injury free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join Lindsay and I for our upcoming Faster Beyond 50 Masterclass. In it, we'll show you how we helped a 70-year-old run a 47-minute, 18-second 10K, and how you can take those exact same principles and apply them in your training. Simply scan the QR code that's on screen right now, or click on the link in the description below to save your seat in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah, spot it. So let's finish off our pyramid, right? So base of our pyramid, sleep, nutrition, and your load management. And as we go to the top of that pyramid, that is where you're filling in with other aspects. Okay. So, whether that is compression socks, I personally prefer foam rolling. I have a really nice foam roller that I can stand and use because I hate lying on the ground with a foam roller. Massage elements, as you mentioned, those compression boots. There's a lot of those aspects out there that people are using, and it's a subjective concept. So a lot of the studies in and around compression garments and all of these is that if you personally don't believe it's going to work, it doesn't work. They've shown that in the studies where they've used a placebo. And so play around with these aspects, figure out what works for you. Just a note on the compression socks. A lot of the studies show, again, where they're useful is not necessarily during running. It's for after, for this recovery aspect. So just concentrate on that, but find the one that works for you. Okay. So that's the important thing. But again, make that the top of your pyramid. If we turn that pyramid upside down and you have the compression garments as your base and nothing else, you're really not going to have a sturdy structure. You want to make sure that we're building that recovery element, those recovery elements with the things that count, and then we're just complementing it with all the other sides around the top of that pyramid.
I'm going to throw one sort of more, let's call it a trend. I mean, all over social media, it seems to be the next big thing now to have your own personalized ice bath or cold water immersion. How do you feel about that from a recovery tool?
Yeah, Dev, the joy of science and being involved in sports science is that, we can look back and go, okay, that we've now debunked that as a concept, and if I think of my early days as a sports scientist, and no comments, please, from the peanut gallery about how long I've been involved in sports science, but my early days as a sports scientist when I was working with the national women's football team, we used ice baths all the time. It was something that we when we were in camp, we would train ice baths, and the girls hated it. I mean, I hate an ice bath as well. What we found now, and where the science has evolved to, is that while ice baths can be effective, you do feel more recovered. What actually is happening, though, is that it is inhibiting your adaptation to your training. So we spoke about how your body breaks down, and then when we recover, you then get that adaptation. You get fitter and faster and stronger. And what's happening there is that when the body is breaking down, the body has its own anti-inflammatory responses. Okay, there's more blood that is sent to certain areas. There's an influx of oxygen. There's white blood cells that often go to these areas because that's the healing process within the body, and that's how it makes itself stronger. And so when we are ice bathing, we're inhibiting that process. We're stopping the body from using its own anti-inflammatory process. And so what you're actually doing is you're delaying your adaptation to training. You're not going to get as much benefit to your training as you would if you just allowed the body to do that, and if you did the pillars or the base of that pyramid more so. And so where an ice bath perhaps would be beneficial now is when you're in competition. So if you're doing a multi-stage race, Dev, like, I mean, you've done Cape Epic before. If my soccer girls were then playing in a tournament, where you need someone to recover quickly and you're not too worried about getting fitter in that week, that's where an ice bath or any kind of cold water immersion, I think, would be useful. But yeah, I wouldn't be utilizing ice baths in your training when you're looking to be getting fitter and stronger and getting that adaptation.
I'm with you, Sean. I mean, we know about recovery now and we talk about it, but I think there's still sort of one part, like, how do you actually know? I mean, this is a common question we get, is how do you know that you have recovered well enough? Like, what should we be looking at when we're talking about monitoring our recovery?
Yeah, great question, because that's exactly it. We're telling you to make sure that you're recovered before you go out for your next session. But how do you know that? So we like to use things that are very practical here at Coach Perry, right? So the first thing is, how are you feeling? Okay, are you feeling absolutely knackered and tired all the time? That probably means that you're not recovering. Okay, so you really need to look at that. We need to make sure that you are sleeping well, that you're feeling good. Yes, of course, life stress plays into that. I'm going to tap into a few metrics that we can use that help us gauge how we are with those things. So firstly, subjective view of how are you feeling. Secondly, we like to use what we call the stair test here at Coach Perry. You're runners. You're more fit than the general population. And I actually have a set of stairs that comes up to my house. And so I can feel, and if you have a set of stairs in the office, walk up those stairs. And if you feel like your legs are heavy, you're a runner. You probably should be able to climb a flight of stairs. But if you feel like your legs are heavy, that's a pretty good indication that you're not fully recovered, right? That you probably are a little bit tired, and that maybe we need to adapt things within our training plan. So those are two very easy tests or subjective measures to just sort of go, oh, okay, yeah, I'm not quite recovered yet. I am a little bit tired. It doesn't mean that I have to push through. It also doesn't mean that I need to, just lie down and bunk a session because Shona says my legs are heavy, I must now rest. I'll give you more indications now on things that we can do and how to adapt those sessions. But some metrics that we can use. These watches, Dev, I mean, they measure so much now, and I always have a thing around, just because we can measure it doesn't mean that it's useful. Okay, so a very basic physiological measurement that I like to use that doesn't even really require your watch is resting heart rate. Okay, of course, if you do have a watch, I'd like you to measure your resting heart rate with a chest strap. But if you're measuring your resting heart rate first thing in the morning, as soon as you've woken up, lying in bed, so you haven't really got, if you've gotten up to go to the bathroom, just come back down and lie down for a couple of minutes before you measure it. As simple as 2 fingers on your wrist for time. Okay, so doing that, or alternatively, obviously using your watch, right? And then measure that resting heart rate. Keep the trend of that over a couple of days, and you are now checking how your resting heart rate changes in relation to you. So if we start seeing some changes in your resting heart rates, where that resting heart rate is going down a little bit, awesome, that's a good sign. Normally is a sign that we are getting a little bit fitter. I don't like to read into that too much, but really when we start seeing this resting heart rate increase by a couple of beats, so let's say 2 to 4 beats over the next couple of days, that is a bit of a red flag that's maybe 2 to 6 beats. Sorry, let me be a bit more specific about that. 2 to 6 beats over a couple of days. It's a bit of a red flag. It could be that maybe you're just really stressed. It could be that maybe you're not sleeping well. It could be that you're perhaps not recovering from your training. So just read into that and go, okay, I need to make some sort of change. What have I done of late? Is family life stressful? Blah, blah, blah. If that resting heart rate increases by perhaps 6 to 10 beats over a couple of days, that is a bit of a bigger red flag to kind of go, okay, I'm not recovering properly. Maybe there's an underlying infection that I'm going to be getting sick. Maybe you could pop into your doctor or have a couple more, like, what's the word? Like effervescence, like a Barocco or something, zinc, multivitamin. That's the word I was looking for. Sorry. Just to make sure that we're getting that immune system back up and running. So resting heart rate it's a really powerful aspect. I am a bit old school with that. I like, as I say, an old school reading. Your watch will give you an average of your resting heart rate throughout the day, or the lowest element throughout the day. But as an example, I wear my watch very loose. Okay, you would need to wear that really, really tight. So where this bone is, really, really tight below that bone, and for the entire day. And even then, I still think that there's a lot of variance in that. I mean, to give you an example, my resting heart rate, and this is not there's no good resting heart, there's no good number. Okay, this is mine, and we can't compare mine and Dev's as an example, or mine and yours, but mine will normally sit when I'm training well in and around 48, when I'm getting fitter maybe 46, but my watch will tell me at the moment that it's sitting on average at around 61. I mean, that's a massive difference. Okay, and so all of these variables are only as good to read into as the data going into it. Okay, so make sure that you're getting a reliable measure. And then lastly, I just wanted to speak around heart rate variability, because again, these devices often come with that. Guys, the only time, as I've just said, the only time I'd recommend that you read into that metric to adjust your training or how you're feeling is if you are getting a reliable measure going in. So if you are only getting your HRV just from your sleep and without a chest strap, I don't believe that data is reliable. So rather make sure that you're measuring your HRV with a chest strap. So heart rate variability, what is that? It is essentially giving you an idea of the balance between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems, okay? And essentially how those two are working up and against each other. So a higher heart rate variability is essentially giving you a better score of training readiness and recovered state and so on. Okay, so that's what you're looking for there. But again, it's got to do with your number and your number over time, not comparable necessarily to Dev comparing to me or me comparing to another friend. It's about your number and how that changes over time.
Sean, yeah, that's a lot to take in. I mean, like you said, there's so many different metrics we can be looking at. I personally love going back to the basics and just using like those subjective measures. Those you can almost never go wrong with that, because I think you know your body better than anyone else does, and any device possibly does. So that's always great.
Yeah, Dev, sorry, before we jump on, just with that, I mean, that's exactly it. Like maybe also using those in conjunction, right? So resting heart rate and HRV and that subjective measure, okay, which I think is really key. And, sorry, just to digress, but quickly, I remember I was in London last year and I asked a friend, oh, good morning, how are you doing? How did you sleep? And she went, yeah, pretty good, and I was like, but how do you feel like you slept well? She goes, yeah, my Fitbit says I slept well, and I'm like, okay, so let's use the devices to guide us, right? To not tell us how we're feeling. So how are you feeling? Oh no, I don't feel like I slept well. Let me check my watch. Yeah, my watch reckons I also didn't sleep well. Let's now make a change from there. So don't let these things dictate how you're feeling. Rather use those two things in as teamwork to make a good decision.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. And you now just mentioned make a change. So when you're talking about making a change, what are we talking about? How should we be adapting, or how should we be putting this information of how we're feeling into our training plans around these recovery focuses?
Yep. So going right back to the beginning of this podcast, we now realize that recovery is important. Okay. So if you are feeling tired, if your HRV is plummeted, your resting heart rate's through the roof, and your legs are sore climbing a set of stairs, you now realize that there's no need to glorify that and to power through that, because that you only get the benefit of your training when you're recovering. Okay. So we just need to realize that that's important. So now we know I'm not recovering. I need to now make a change in my plan. So let's say you're feeling tired. All of these metrics and things say to you, okay, yeah, I'm actually not recovering, but tomorrow I've got a hill session in my plan. So then I really would recommend that you adapt your week, right? So move that high intensity session out and perhaps just do a 30-minute easy run. And again, I know we like to talk about a 20 to 30-minute easy run, because don't plan to go and do an hour and then the legs just don't ever just feel better. So 20 to 30 minutes is not far away from your house that you don't feel like you can turn around and come back. And also, I know runners, the ego kicks in. If you said you're going to do an hour, you're going to power through and do an hour. So drop your ego and just head out for a 20 to 30 minutes easy run, go for a walk, do some cross training, so that you can manipulate or not manipulate, but really adapt your plan to now help you to recover, so that then you're ready to go and do those sessions later on in the week. By just powering through, if you go and do that interval session on very tired legs, you're putting yourself at risk of injury. You're also putting yourself just at more risk of just breaking down and down and down. And that's how we land up injured. It's how we land up perhaps overtrained, and it's how you're not going to get to race day at performing at your best because you're just depleting your entire physiological system over time. So utilize this to adapt to make sure that you're recovering correctly so that you are now ready to go and smash the next 4 weeks of your plan.
Awesome, Sean. Thanks so much. There's so much content in this, like sort of mind-blowing stuff. And I hope it is just starting to twig some light bulbs here around the need for recovery. We talk again about those recovery sessions need to be as important as your training session. So I really hope this is opening, maybe changing perspective and making sure, or you're starting to realize that recovery is not a bad thing, and really hope that you feel the benefit. And I can tell you now you will. If you can just implement what Sean has mentioned here in detail, and feel free, guys, there's a lot of information in this podcast. Feel free to go back and watch it again if you have to take a couple of notes. But if you can implement what Sean has mentioned here, I can assure you almost immediately you're going to start feeling the improvements in your performance and how you're feeling in those training runs. We're getting there. We're starting to get into the meat of it from next week, and hopefully this week you're recovering well enough so that when we do get stuck in next week, we're ready to rock and roll. Sean, again, thank you so much for your time and the insight here. This is really, really valuable stuff. And yeah, guys, happy training. Have a great week, and we'll catch you again in the next episode. Take care.
Bye, team.